Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. Today on Teddy Atlas's podcast, Dustin Poirier said that he's accepted a fight against Nate Diaz. So I wanted to make a video kind of reacting to the fight, giving my opinion whether or not I think this fight will actually come to fruition. If it does come to fruition, when will it happen? We don't have a date for it yet. Also, I'll give you my early prediction and also something I've not heard anybody else mention, and it's just a little kind of side note that I thought of. How a potential Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz matchup could rely on Israel Adesanya. So we'll get to that a little bit later in the video. But first off, let's talk about this fight itself. I absolutely love this matchup. This is a fight that I've kind of dreamt about for a while, and it's just never come to fruition. It was originally booked for UFC 230 way back when Daniel Cormier fought Derek Lewis on that New York card. After the fight was announced, we had a press conference. Then Nate Diaz joked about pulling out here and there. Then eventually Dustin Poirier pulled out. I believe it was with a hip injury. And we never got to see the fight. We got the pictures of the stare down at the press conference, but we never actually got to see the fight. And now there's not a better time for this fight. Dustin Poirier is coming off a loss. Nate Diaz hasn't won a fight since Anthony Pettis back in 2019. So it makes perfect sense. Nate Diaz is nowhere near a title within the lightweight division or the welterweight division. Dustin Poirier is nowhere near a title shot right now just because he's just lost to Charles Oliveira at UFC 269. It's a fan-friendly stylistic matchup. Both guys super durable. Both guys have very good striking. Both guys have good jiu-jitsu. Both guys are just very well-rounded, and there's no way that this fight is boring. Nate Diaz, every fight he's in is exciting. Dustin Poirier, the same. Every fight he's in is exciting. And I think this is a fight that even though both guys are coming off losses, even though neither guy is going to be fighting for a title in the very near future, it's a fight that can still sell for the UFC. So it's a fight that they are willing to put together because it will actually draw in pay-per-view buys. And then also you just have the back and forth between these two guys for literal years. And I know there's been a lot of back and forth on Twitter today after Dustin Poirier made this announcement, and then there's articles being written that it's not going to happen. And that's why also I wanted to make this video, because I wanted to give my thoughts on whether or not it will actually happen, because I really hope that it does. I love this matchup. But if I had to give my guess on whether or not it will happen, I'm pretty close to 50-50. I think there's a chance it doesn't happen and one of these guys ends up fighting Conor in the summertime. But I'm going to say it does happen. I'm going to say I'm 60-40, 60% it does happen. I just believe, Dustin wants it. Nate wants it. Barring some negotiation issues, I think the UFC has to put it together. The fans want it. And even if one of these guys, obviously one of these guys has to lose, it's not like they're going to lose much of much stock, because, Nate Diaz, no matter who he fights and loses to, he's not losing any stock. Look, he got beat up for 4.5 rounds by Leon Edwards, really for 4 rounds and then 4 minutes and 30 seconds of the 5th round. He rocked Leon Edwards at the end, and people are acting like Nate Diaz won the fight. So really, neither guy's stock will drop in this fight. The winner can go on to fight Conor McGregor when he returns with a little bit of momentum. Even the loser could go on to fight Conor McGregor, honestly, because you have that Dustin Poirier 4th fight with the controversy with the leg break. You always have the Nate Diaz trilogy. But I think the UFC has to put this together. And if I had to guess where it will happen, I think it will happen February 12th, UFC 271. This is the main event of Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2. And I'm going to get to the Adesanya point in a minute. But I believe that's when it's going to happen. Dustin Poirier made a comment that the fight would kind of be on short notice a little bit. And he said about 6 weeks away. And that makes sense. UFC 271 is February 12th. That's about 6 weeks away. So that makes perfect sense. So I really, truly believe that it will happen. Now, as far as my early prediction for this fight, I feel like, this fight's been talked about for literal months at this point, if not years, but it's really been talked about heavily in the last 4 or 5 months. And I feel like the overall majority of people, especially hardcore MMA fans, are acting as if Dustin Poirier will go out there and absolutely destroy Nate Diaz. Now, I do not believe that. I think this fight is very competitive. I know some of you guys are going to call me crazy. I think Nate Diaz has a legitimate chance to win this fight. Nate Diaz is super durable. Dustin Poirier is super durable as well. I see this fight probably going to decision if I had to guess. Neither one of these guys I don't think is really going to be shooting on takedowns, try to hold the other down. If they do, I think it'll be Dustin Poirier just because I think he's a little bit better wrestler. But I don't know if he wants to risk being on the ground with Nate Diaz, considering Dustin, in his majority of his big losses, he ends up losing by submission. So, but if I had to give my early prediction, and again, I may change my mind. I think Nate Diaz has a legitimate chance, but I'm going to go with Dustin Poirier. I just think he's a little bit more powerful. I believe this fight will happen at 170. I think Dustin will be even more powerful. We've seen him at 155. If he gets to not even cut weight and come in at like a lean 170, I think he's going to have a massive power advantage. And Nate Diaz, the way he wins fights is kind of getting guys into this crazy pace, and then fourth, fifth round, they wear out, and Nate Diaz takes over and finishes them. That's not going to happen against Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier, think about that Max Holloway fight. Dustin Poirier put it on from the very first minute of the fight to the very last minute of the fight against Max Holloway, who is known for his cardio. So I just really don't believe that Nate Diaz strategy of kind of letting your opponent beat you up and wear out a little bit and then you come on strong in the later rounds is going to work against Dustin Poirier. I think Nate has to try to win this fight early or damage Dustin Poirier early. But I really think this fight, in a weird way, will play out similar to the Dustin Poirier-Max Holloway fight because I believe it will be competitive. I believe both guys will land hard shots, but I think it will come down to a power advantage by Dustin Poirier. And also, I think Dustin has more tools. I think he can push Nate up against the fence, grind him out a little bit, win a decision, maybe take him down, but not spend too much time on the ground, just because he's going to be kind of using his risk assessment to try to avoid submissions, knowing that he loses his big fights via submission. Charles Oliveira, Khabib Nurmagomedov, he's lost those submissions recently. And even in the Oliveira fight, he said he kind of clamped down on Oliveira when he was in his full guard because he was worried that, Oliveira might get his back and submit him, which he eventually did. But I think now's the perfect time. I hope the UFC makes it, and I believe it will happen at UFC 271, or at least I'm hopeful it will. Now, to get to my point about how this could all rely on Israel Adesanya, and I could be way off on this. I really have no other information than what I'm going to give you here in this video. But it also came out today, it was being reported by, I think it was Ariel Helwani, that Israel Adesanya has still not signed his deal to fight Robert Whittaker at UFC 271 in February. And if that's the case, we've seen the UFC in the past, especially when they really need a main event, to use kind of a backup plan. And I believe they could be looking to put Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz together as a backup plan, and also to kind of decrease the leverage that Israel Adesanya has, because he knows they need him for a main event on February 12th for UFC 271. And if they book that Nate Diaz-Dustin Poirier fight for the same card, they take away a little bit of leverage in negotiations for Israel Adesanya. I don't know what exactly is the holdup there. We don't have any information. That's why I'm saying this could matter, this could not matter, but I figure it was worth mentioning in this video. And also, we've seen in the past, I think it was Khabib Nurmagomedov and Eddie Alvarez, and it was a Rafael Dos Anjos situation for the lightweight title, where I think one of them was kind of negotiating with the UFC, and they said, okay, well, then we'll give Eddie Alvarez the title shot instead, or we'll give Khabib the title shot instead. We've seen the UFC do these types of things. So if Israel Adesanya is trying to renegotiate his deal, and he knows he has the UFC, well, you need a main event, so you have to come to terms with me. They could say, well, we don't need you. We got Nate Diaz versus Dustin Poirier on the card. Because as much as it sucks to say, because they're coming off losses, neither one of them are champions, the UFC could headline a card with Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz. No doubt they would sell pay-per-views. It would be a big fight. We've seen it with Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal. They drew a lot of pay-per-views for that. It wasn't like a crazy 1 million pay-per-view buy thing, but it was sustainable. It could replace a title fight. And if Adesanya versus Whittaker is rescheduled or they can't come to terms, I think the UFC is more than happy to move forward with the Nate Diaz versus Dustin Poirier fight. And that's why I figured it was worth mentioning in this video. Ideally, I would hope that Adesanya versus Whittaker 2 happens on UFC 271, as well as a 5-round co-main event that's a non-title fight, Nate Diaz versus Dustin Poirier. We've only seen 2 5-round non-title, non-main events so far, and it was Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards, and it was Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler. And I'm going to tell you guys this right now. If the UFC makes Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz, and they do not make this fight 5 rounds, we need to absolutely riot, because that fight needs to be 5 rounds. Look at both guys' stamina. Look at Nate Diaz's history of coming back later in the fight. And if they don't make it 5 rounds, it's an absolute travesty to the sport. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments. What do you think about the Israel Adesanya situation? Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching.